All right. So with regards to nested CRUD, so just repeat kind of what I said in the past, several challenges such as like posts. We would see all the posts. If we wanted to view an individual post, we'd go to that post ID and we'd be able to edit that post, and delete that post. But now what if we wanted to go to like post and view all the comments to that post? And maybe you wanted to see an individual comment that's associated with that post. So now this is where it becomes nested CRUD, because we're nesting and we're going to posts and then we're viewing all post comments, and now we're viewing individual posts, and we're going to be able to edit those or view individual comments associated with that post. And now we're going to be able to edit those comments and delete comments, something similar like that. So with that, we're going to go ahead and create, I'm going to bring up VS Code. We're going to create a little code platoon application that has cohorts, and each cohort has a student. So we're going to be able to view a list of cohorts. We're going to be able to click into each cohort. We're going to be able to see the list of students. We're going to be able to click on that student, be able to see an individual student, and be able to edit, delete, doing all the CRUD capability associated with cohorts and students. Any questions, or what questions do you have about how we're building upon that? All right. So what I'm going to be doing, I'm going to be building, I'm going to just create a directory called nested CRUD. I'm going to cd into nested CRUD. I'm going to open that nested CRUD into a new VS Code window. And inside of here, I'm going to create a new Django project, create an application, all of that stuff. So I'm going to create first thing I need to do is create a virtual environment, venv. So Python -m venv space venv. So created that virtual environment. There it is. Now I need to go into that virtual environment source, venv bin activate. I've gone into that virtual environment. Great. Now I'm going to create a Django project called CP project, code platoon project. Why not? So Django-admin start project CP project. Space period, because I don't want it to be nested, because I'm already inside of my nested CRUD directory and everything should exist in here.
Don't you have to install?
Oh yeah, I probably should install. I think it's because I have Django installed globally, but let's install Django. And should we use Python or the Django's built-in SQLite? No, we should keep on using Psycob PG2 or Psycho PG2. So let's go ahead and do that just to make sure everything's still working. All right. Done. All right. So I installed Django, so I can do pip list. You can see Django and then a Psycob G2 installed there. Now, what do we want to do? Let's go ahead and create, we're going to be using a Postgres database. Let's go ahead and create DB and call this called CP. Let's call it just code platoon. Why not? Oh, I already have one that exists. Let's just call it CP project or CP DB. So code platoon database. So I'm going to go into my settings. I'm going to link my Postgres database to my Django project. Right now it's using the SQLite database, which is totally fine. We can use it for if we want to, but just trying to get in the used to creating Postgres databases. We'll just use a Postgres database. But for your assessment, don't feel like you have to use a Postgres database. You can just use the SQLite database. CPDB. All right, so I linked my Postgres database called CPDB right there to my Django project. All right, so next, what questions do you have about that process?
So if we were just stick to SQLite, would anything else change as far as like how we code everything up? That'd be like the same process.
Everything would be the same. The only difference is when you would make migrations, you'd have another file here called like SQLite. Or you have the SQLite file here. That's the only difference. That's the only thing that would change.
Would you want to ignore that file? Like get ignored?
Yeah, I mean, you could get ignored if you want. It depends on if you want to push that data up to GitHub. You don't have to. But yeah, you could ignore it if you want. There's really like, it depends if you want that data to be secret or not. It's not a big file at all.
So, yeah, okay, because that's what I was thinking about size. Because I mean, if we're committing I don't know, a lot of rows and stuff into that SQLite, I don't know. It seemed like it could be a big one at some point.
No, and if your file gets absolutely huge, you probably want to actually use an actual database instead of a SQLite database at that point. All right, so we created our code Platoon project. Let's go ahead and create our app called Python manage.py start app. Let's just call it cohorts and students, because this app is going to list a bunch of cohorts and students. So I created my Django app right here. Now we have to link this app to our Django project in our installed apps. We link it in our installed apps. All right. So next, let's go ahead and build out our models. So we're going to have two models, cohort model, models.model. And we're going to have a student model. And the cohort is going to have cohort name equals, so it's going to have a cohort name, a start date, and an end date. And for the date, so start date and end date, we're just going to use text field or char field just to keep things simple right now. But yeah, models char field, max length. You could determine what the max length would be by going through the military alphabet and seeing what the longest one is that. But just for the sake of simplicity for this lecture, we're just going to keep it at 255. We're going to have a start date. We're just going to keep that. I guess let's make it 20 for the hell of it. Start date, end date, same thing, 20. Again, we're just doing char fields here. We're not doing date field, just again for simplicity, because this is not really that important for this lecture. So let's actually also add def under string method. So we can return f string. Let's do ID. What the hell? Oh man, what did I just do down here? Pressed something. Okay, I'm still in my virtual environment, just making sure. So let's just do string ID. We can do self.id and cohort name self.cohort name. Why not? Let's just keep it simple like that. So now for students, So a student belongs to a cohort. So we can do cohort equals models dot foreign key. Foreign key. And that's going to be linked to the cohorts model. We're going to do the on delete models dot cascade. And we're going to do the related name equals students. So student belongs to a cohort. So we can do first name equals, again, models.char field. Like so. And we can also do that for the last name. And we can also do something similar for the dunder string ID. And then we'll do, first name. I'll just actually do full name. First name. Last name. All right. Those are our models. What questions do you have about cohort and the student model? Pretty straightforward.
For the related name, what's the point of the related name?
So yes, good. Yeah, good question. So the related name is, so if we do student.cohort, we can grab the student cohort, but we can also go, so if we didn't have the student name and we wanted to figure out what students belong to the cohort, there isn't an easy way to do that. I mean, unless you know how, but the related name allows us to go cohort.students. So cohort.students and get all the students associated with that cohort. So it allows us to go back. So if we start from student.cohort, we can get the students cohort. But if we had a cohort object and we do .students, we can grab all the students associated with that cohort. So if we start from cohort, we're able to get all the students associated with that cohort through this related name or via this related name. If we didn't have it here,
okay,
there's another way. There's like a built-in way to do it. I can't remember off the top of my head, but it's pretty straightforward, but you would have to know that that exists on the cohort object to get all the students. But this just explicitly says like cohort.students will list all the students associated with that cohort.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Yep. All right. So now let's go ahead and make a migration scripts to put this in there to migrate it to our database. So Python manage.py, make migrations. All right. So created a model cohort, created model student. And we can see in our migrations directory, we have this 0001 initial, and that's what was created. So now let's go ahead and migrate this. So Python manage.py migrate. And let's just first migrate the cohorts and students app. So all migrations for the cohorts and students. So we applied that 0001 initial file. So it created a cohort model and a student model. But let's go ahead and also apply all the other migration scripts that come pre-built with Django. So if I do migrate, Python manage.py migrate, it's going to migrate all the built-in migration scripts as well. All right. Now, do we want to use the admin panel to add cohorts and students, just some seed data in there?
No.
Why not?
Wouldn't we learn more if we just did it like the way we're going to do it on the exam?
You can do it any way you want on the exam.
Oh, okay. Whichever then.
Yeah. So on the exam, you're not going to be actually seeding data. Like the data is more likely already going to be there. So that, yeah. But all right, let's not use. Well, we'll do a little bit. We'll do it both ways. So if we're going to use, let's just use the shell for right now. So I'm going to use Python. I'm going to do pip install Django extensions. And I'm going to connect the Django extensions to our settings so I don't have to. All right, so I can do Python manage.py shell is underscore plus. All right, so let's go ahead and create some cohorts. So I'm going to do C1 equals cohort cohort underscore name equals Mike. Start date. I actually don't know when the start date is. Actually, let's just go with what's in the documentation. Bravo start date equals 1-4-2017. End date equals 5-1-17. Like so. I'm just making sure everything's correct.
Tom, I think I might have missed this, but I see the command again for the shell plus.
It is just
Django extension installed.
Python manage.shell plus.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Okay.
All right. Well,
Make sure to add it to your settings, though. If not, it won't work.
Yep. All right. So let's go ahead and save that to. So right now it's like ID none. So it's not actually saved to our database. So now if I do C1.save, it saved it. Now if I do C1, you can see that it actually has been saved. But let's go ahead and PSQL into, what is it, CP project. What was the name of, CPDB, PSQL CPDB. I can do /D. You can see all the database. Now I can do select star from cohorts and students. Is it cohort? I need to add that. So you can see the Bravo is in there right now. But let's go ahead and use the admin panel. So in order to use the admin panel, I'll need to create a super user, Python manage.py, create super user. I'm going to use the blank tom@email.com, 123. So I created a super user named TA Preet. I added the email. I created a password of 123, and I added that to. So now I'm able to access the admin dashboard that's built into Django. But I'll need to register my models to the admin panel or the admin dashboard right here. So in order to do that, I'll need to register the models. So I can do from.models, import cohort and the student model. And I can register my models, cohort student.
Hey, Tom, I have a question.
Yep.
So I don't know if this has been asked before, but With super user, does that has to be created for every brand new project that you do? Or is that something that could be saved on like your local machine for your host?
Nope. So each super user is associated with each Django project. So you're actually creating a user in the database using Django's built-in auth user model. So if we want to use the admin panel to interact with our models, and we have multiple models, we have to put them in a list, and then admin.site, we're going to register our models. And this is just a variable. This can be any, we can call this anything. My apps models. We can do that as well. Again, this is just a variable that represents this list of students. So now if I run Python manage.py, run server to get into our admin panel. So admin, I've got TA preet, 1, 2, 3. Now I've got my cohorts. Now I've already put one cohort in there with the ID of Bravo. Let's go ahead and add another one of Charlie. And when was that created? That was 5-27-2017. And that ended, what was that? 8-10-17. So I save that. So now I've got two cohorts, Bravo and Charlie. Now let's go back and add some students to each cohort. So I'm going to add a student. I can add a student to Bravo. We're going to Conlin M, save and add another. Bravo, Scott P, save and add another. Mike Lee, and save and add another. So I'm adding all those to Bravos. Now let's add a couple of Charlie, Darnell G. And this is just to quickly add some data to it if you're just like experimenting. Let's add another one to Bravo. Let's see, and save. So now I've got 6 students added to my database. Cool, done right there. So I'm going to kill the server. All right. So now let's go ahead and start building out our views and everything. What's the process in building out our views and everything? What's the routine? What do we want to do first?
Probably start with URL.
Yes. All right. Let's start with the project URLs. Oh, what happened? Project URLs. All right. So I'm going to need to import the include path. When I go to cohorts / whatever, I want to include the cohorts and students.urls file. All right. So I created my URL pattern for my Django project. Now let's go into our cohorts and students app and create our URLs file there. So I just like copying the URLs just in case, just to like prevent errors. So when I go to cohorts / what something, I want to use, what do I want to display? So when I go to just cohorts, I want to have a list of cohorts. So I'm going to create a views called cohort underscore list. I'm going to name that cohort underscore list. So I haven't created that yet. So I'm going to do from period import all the views. All right. So I created my view, or I created my URL. And when I created my URL, I'm saying I'm going to create a view method called view or called cohort list. What question do you have about the URL, creating the URLs? Nothing. All right. So now we're in.
I'm sorry, can you go back 1 second? I missed the imports, or I missed them.
This part.
Yeah, that's it. It was pretty
Okay.
simple now that I see. Thank you.
Yep. So now let's go ahead and create our views. So what I'm going to need for this, I'm going to need my models. I'm going to import, might as well import my cohort and my student model because I know I'm going to need my student model at some point in the future. So for here, let's go ahead and define a cohort list that takes in the request. And here, pretty simple, we're just going to get all the cohorts. So I can say like all cohorts equals cohort dot objects dot all. All right. And I could create a data if I want to. Data equals all cohorts. All cohorts. You don't necessarily need to do this. I just like keeping things separate. And then I want to return the render method, and that render takes in 3 arguments: the request, the template, and here I'm just going to create a directory called cohorts that's going to list or contain all the templates associated with cohorts. And this is going to be cohorts list.html, which I have not created yet, and that data dictionary right there. So created my URL, created my view. Now I'm going to create my my template. So I'm going to create templates. And inside my templates directory, I'm going to create another directory just called cohorts. And inside my cohorts directory, this is where I'm going to hold the cohorts list.html file or template. I'm going to split that screen. I'm going to collapse that. So in here, this is going to list all the cohorts. So I'm going to make an H1 tag and just says all cohorts. And I'm going to create an unordered list. And in here, I'm going to say for cohort in, I'm looking over here at what's being passed in, all cohorts. I'm going to need that N4 right. And in here, I'm going to create a div. I'm going to link, make a list. I think it's double. And I'm going to do cohort underscore name. Just do that for right now. Yeah. And let's go ahead and run this and see if we can get a list of cohorts. So Python manage.py, run server. All right, everything looks good. So I can log out from the admin panel and just go to cohorts. And there we go. We have a list of cohorts. Questions, or what questions do you have about any of that?
Can you go back to your views file and remind me what the purpose of the data dictionary is?
I just like to keep this separate because, well, you need a dictionary to pass. In order to pass data into a template, you need to pass it in as a dictionary. So I just created a dictionary and assigned it to a variable called data and passed that in here. But I could just pass that dictionary directly into the template like so, and it'll still work. So again, you'll need to, when you pass data into a template, you need to pass it in as a dictionary with keys on it. Well, you don't have to pass keys on it, but if you want to pass data into it, you need keys.
It's not really an important question, but I guess I wasn't paying attention. Did you add the Charlie class outside of the shell at some point?
Yes, I added it via the admin panel.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah, I missed that. Thank you.
Yep. What other questions do you have?
Can I check out the project URLs file real quick?
All right. What other questions do you have? So granted, my CP project, I'm going to cohorts. I'm saying, hey, go ahead and look at the cohorts and students Django app URLs. I come over to the Django app URLs. Where the hell do the URLs go? Yeah, I'm importing importing the views. So when I go to just cohorts, looks for a view or executes the cohort list view method, goes to views, finds cohort list, grabs all the cohorts from the database, renders this cohort list HTML template and passes in all the cohorts, which is a dictionary, into the cohorts list. Come over here to the cohort list HTML template. I'm looping through all the cohorts. So for cohort in all cohorts, display the cohort name, and then I'm ending the for loop.
Hey, Tom, I know this might be a little bit out of scope, so you can kind of punt it for later, but since this is the first template we've made here, is it better when we first start these projects to start our styling right now as soon as we have the first template that we're going to use? Or is it better just to wait until the end once we get functionality done?
Yeah, I would wait to get functionality done because you can go down the CSS rabbit hole real quick. And next thing you know, 2 hours gone by and you really haven't added any functionality because you're trying to get a div to line up perfectly. So yeah, I would just get the functionality to work, but make sure your HTML file is like architected correctly to account for whether it's Flexbox or whatever. But for these challenges, we're just doing basic templates here. All right. Any other questions?
Yeah, I was kind of just wondering, you know, what would it be possible just to pass the cohort object by itself and then call the objects.all on the other side? And would there be performance or any issues with that? Because I was just thinking, like, I don't know if it'd be interesting if you could just pass cohort over as a context, and then you can call like all cohorts at the top. It could be like all cohorts _ name, and then like in that for cohort in all, or sorry, cohorts .objects.all or whatever in the for loop. And I'm just wondering if, I don't know if that would work or if that would be a performance hit later on, or it'd be probably hard.
Added the cohort object here.
Yeah, just sending that through.
Yeah, I do not know, but I'm not going to try it right now either.
Yeah, something I'm gonna play around with there.
Yeah.
I'll see.
All right. So we created all cohorts. Now let's go ahead and repeat that process. So we got our cohort list. Now let's go ahead and grab a cohort detail. All right, so we're back in our URLs. I'm gonna replicate that down here. Let me see if someone's. All right, so cohort detail, we're going to look at for the integer or the cohort underscore ID. I believe that's what it looks like. And we're going to look at for a cohort detail view method. So right there, we get an error down here because our server is still running, has no attribute cohort detail, which is correct because we haven't created that yet. So let's go ahead and create that def cohort detail that takes in the request and the cohort underscore ID. And in here, I'm going to grab an individual cohort, but I'm going to be grabbing an individual cohort a bunch of times. So I'm going to create a helper function that just says def get cohort that passes in a cohort ID and literally just returns cohort dot objects dot get where ID equals cohort ID. And so here I can just grab the individual cohort by running that get cohort helper method. And I just pass in that cohort ID that I'm passing into the cohort detail into here to grab that cohort instance. So okay, again, I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to return the render, but instead of the cohort list HTML template, I'm going to do cohort detail HTML template. And instead of all cohorts, I'm just going to pass in this individual cohort instance that I'm getting from this get cohort helper method, which literally just returns an individual cohort. What questions do you have about that process? Pretty straightforward. All right, so again, created my view. Now I have to go ahead and create this cohort HTML template.
Sorry, Tom, I got a quick question.
Yep.
Ankur has been using the try accept to kind of make sure that these, if there's something that goes wrong, that it kind of raises an exception instead of just breaking. I found it really actually detrimental for me in the building of my code last night because the error messages are actually really helpful. So I ended up commenting out my try accepts when I had problems. What's your perspective on that? Do you how do you kind of build robustness in the end product without kind of making it detrimental for your building process?
Try accepts, it's pretty good to handle because you can handle specific exceptions. It's good to use them, but you don't have to use them. So I'm using just basic. I'm not going to be using the try accepts for this challenge, for this tutorial, just because, because I don't want to. It's kind of up to you of whether or not you want to use the try accept. So if it's detrimental for you from progressing, don't use them right away. And then you can go back if you want to use them or implement them to add them later on. But again, make it work first and then go back and refactor.
Okay, yeah, that kind of felt like after I got on in the project that it was like a Gucci feature that I would build in later, kind of the same as like CSS. It wasn't like a requirement to make it functional. So it sounds like that's your perspective as well. Thanks.
Yep.
And I'm sorry if I could just get a little more elaboration on that. Is it because we just had like a very general error thing? Would you want to have like multiple errors that will give you a different message like while you're building it in? You typically wouldn't just have one, right? It would be kind of like
it just depends on how many errors you want to account for. It's up to you. Because you can do a try except and have a bunch of different exceptions based off of the type of error you're getting if you want. But so I wouldn't focus.
Tom,
Well, go ahead.
Could you go to your URLs from your in your app, the cohorts and students, the URLs?
Yep. I'm in it right now.
The part that okay, thank you.
Yep. All right. So now we have to create the cohorts list or the cohort detail HTML template right here. So I'm going to go ahead and create that. So cohort underscore detail. Cohort underscore detail dot HTML. So I'm going to bring that over here. I'm going to delete that. So now this cohort detail is just going to have an individual H2. It's going to display the cohort name. We can add some other stuff. Make that paragraph tag. We're going to have start date. We're going to have cohort end. I guess just end date. Cohort, what is it? End date. 8. All right. And then we'll add any links that we might need to add that to this later on. But maybe actually, let's just add it now. So what we're going to eventually end up doing is having a edit cohort link and a form to delete, but we'll add that later, I guess. And this href, let's add, just have it go nowhere right now. So I think that looks okay. But now if we come over here, let's refresh it. We still have to add a link, make this a link tag, but let's just manually go to like the very first one. So
Tom, you are flying for my small little brain.
Okay. So, well, for the sake of time, we're just gonna have to keep going. But yeah, I'm gonna go through what I just did. So if I go here, page not found, if you notice it right here, I've got that ending // and that's because in my URLs, I didn't add that ending / right there. So right there, I've got my Bravo cohort displaying. If I want to manually go to number 2, I've got my Charlie to display as well. So again, let's just quickly review what I just did. I created my URL that goes to cohort/ID, some cohort ID that looks at into the views file and looks for a cohort detail page or detail view method. So comes over here. We've got this cohort detail view method that takes in a cohort ID. I assign a variable called cohort that passes this cohort ID into this get cohort helper function. And this get cohort helper function just grabs a cohort from an ID based on the ID, the cohort ID. So I've got a cohort instance, and then it renders this cohort detail page where I'm passing in a cohort into the detail page. I've got my cohort detail HTML template, which I'm rendering the cohort name, the cohort start date, and the cohort end date. And I've got this link tag, this edit cohort that doesn't go anywhere right now. What questions do you have about?
Hey, Tom,
that?
I have a question.
Yep.
Under the CP project in the URLs, if you go to that page, like yesterday when I forgot to, and under the project URLs in the paths, where I forgot the / on the path, that created a lot of problems. But that's the only spot where the / created a lot of problems. Like if I omitted it from the actual app URLs, like I never had an issue with it. What's up with that?
Well, because you probably didn't have a / there. So if you omitted it from here, like cohorts, and don't have one here, it's just going to prepend those together. So it won't have a / in between these two items.
Okay, but you do need the / right there in that page that you're on.
Right here or this one?
I know you, yeah, under the project URLs, you definitely do need one because
Yes.
it wouldn't even load without it. But in the other one, you need one at the end there as well.
It's good to do that. It's good to just
Okay.
end a forwarding because it's you might run into issues.
Got
Yeah,
it.
just so get in the habit of adding ending /.
Well, and the point is there's gonna be another link that goes off of that path, correct?
Correct. All right. So in here, I'm at cohorts, but I want to make these links and link actually to the individual cohort. So I'm going to go back to my cohort list. And in here for the list, I'm going to create an A tag and move that in the middle of there. And this href should go, we're going to use a named route. URLs is a URL. We'll figure it out. That's going to look at the cohort _ detail view method. And I'm going to pass in the cohort ID to equal the individual cohort .id. I think that's it. So if I refresh that.
You need a %sign.
Yes, I do. Thank you. So thank you. So yeah, I forgot that %sign. It would have thrown some error. It still might throw an error. So let's refresh. All right, good. It did not throw an error. So instead of using the back arrow to go back, let's go ahead and in our detail page, add a link. Let's add a break to it, an HR, and just click back to cohorts. And this URL should just go to cohort. Let's do the double. So I'm doing double brackets or double quotes on the outside so I can go to the cohort _ list. So if I refresh that, I can go back to cohorts, takes me to all cohorts. Now I can just navigate easily. All right. So created cohort detail page. Now let's go ahead and create the ability to create a new cohort. So again, create a new URL. I'm going to /new. I'm going to create a view method called new cohort. All right, created my URL. So let's go ahead and for a new cohort, def new cohort, takes in the request. But now I need to actually create a form for this cohort model. So let's go ahead and create a form for that model. So inside of my app, I'm going to create a forms.py file. And this forms is going to inherit from the forms module or forms object. So I'm going to have to import models, import the cohort model, and might as well import the student model. So these are model forms. These are we're going to be generating forms that are associated with some of our models in our database. So I'm going to class cohort form. It's going to inherit from the forms model form class. And the model form class, just the way it is, it's got a subclass called meta. And meta takes in some attributes, a variable model, which is what model this model form is going to be looking at, which is the cohort model, and what fields we want the user to be able to fill out. So we want to be able to fill out the cohort name,
Hey, Tom, question.
start date. Yep.
Could you in theory have two forms? Could you have a cohort form and a student form and they would both go in that same file? So for model, for a student form, it would just be model student.
So having another form, creating
Yeah,
another
let's say
one.
could you have two forms on one web page and then a cohort form and then a student form if you were filling out information?
Yeah, you can do that.
Okay.
Speaking of student form, let's go ahead and create the student form because we're going to need that as well at some point in the future. So I'm going to say student form. What model that is associated with? It's the student. What do we need to add when we're filling out a new student? We can fill out the cohort and their first name and last name. All right. So once we finish this new cohort, we'll go ahead and take a break. So
I don't know if this matters, but I don't know if you needed end date instead of end form in the forms file.
I'm sorry. Oh,
End form. Yep. Yeah.
Thank you. That would have mattered. So inside my views, I'm going to, from forms, I'm going to import this, I guess, the cohort form, and might as well import the student form. All right. So for this request, we're going to either take in a GET request, which is right when we land on the new form page or the new cohort form page, or we're going to take in a POST request when a user actually submits to create a new form. So we're going to say, hey, if yesterday Ankur did the try except where he's explicitly saying, hey, if it's a GET request, do XYZ, or if it's a request.method equals POST request, do an XYZ. But here we're just going to do, it's either going to be a POST request. If it's not a POST request, we're just going to assume it's a GET request, and we're going to execute that now, that at the very end. So we're going to say, hey, if the request.method equals a POST request, we're going to create a new form instance, cohort form instance, where we're going to pass in the request.post. So that's where it's a dictionary of data that has that CSRF token and whatever field names we want to add onto that form. We're saying, hey, if the form.is valid, just to make sure the form is valid, we're going to create a new cohort instance. We're going to do form.save. We're going to commit equals false. So we're not explicitly saving it to the database quite yet because we actually want to create an instance of this cohort initially. And I'll show you why. And then we're going to actually save this cohort to the database. And after we save it, we're going to do the return. We're going to redirect the user to this individual cohort that we just created. So we're going to redirect the user to the cohort _ detail name page. And what we're going to pass in there is the cohort's ID, the new cohort.id. And that's why we actually explicitly say don't save it right away. So we're gonna probably have to import. Oh, looks like I already imported redirect there. And if everything works, I redirected. Great. Else, if it's not a POST request, that means we're going to assume that it's going to be a GET request. We're just going to create a form, a blank cohort form instance, and we're going to return render the request. We're going to cohorts. We're going to create a cohort form.html template, and the type, we're going to pass in that form instance, as well as the type of form. I'll say type of form. And this is going to be a new, like a new cohort. So that's the new cohort view method. We'll see if it works. If it doesn't, we'll go ahead and debug. But now we're going to have to create a cohort form template.
Tom, can you hit real quick on that? You said you didn't save specifically so that you could pass something down to another line. I'm not sure I fully understand exactly what you said you're doing. So
form.saved commit equals false means I'm not saving it directly to the database. But right here, I'm creating an instance of cohort. And the reason why I'm creating an instance of the cohort is because I'm going to want to pass that cohort ID to that cohort detail page.
Okay, and if you didn't basically do that way, it would just instantly grab all that, throw it straight into the database, not create the instance. It wouldn't be accessible. It wouldn't be there for you.
I could be wrong, but if I just did form.save, it would have just saved it and everything to the database.
Okay.
And I wouldn't have that cohort ID to be able to pass along to the cohort detail page.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Hey, Tom, I have a question too. On that page right there, the form where you put new, the type of form and you write new, that last argument or parameter is optional, right?
Yeah, I don't have to do this. This is just so I can display to the user what kind of.
Okay, that's what I figured. Thank you.
Yeah, I can even just say like new cohort. But I can. Yep.
Could you please explain the line 23 again? The cohort.save. What does this do?
This is actually saving it into the database. The .save is saving it to the database. And I'll show you this when I actually go ahead and create this form and we go through it. So,
Tom?
Yep.
Oh, yeah. So I guess I just want to make sure. So if you hit form.save commit were true, what's the difference there?
I don't think, I think true will actually save it to the database, but it's just like doing this.
Yeah. So why do we break it out into 2 steps?
Because we want that cohort ID instance to pass along to the detail page.
Okay, but I think if you save it, the ID should be created. Like if you do format.save, I think it saves. Like I guess I don't understand the difference between doing cohort.save on line 23 versus form.save. I believe that they both committed to the database.
No, I don't think commit false does not save it to the database.
Correct, but what's the advantage of doing it this way? I guess.
Well, if we do just form.save, right? So like something like that, we won't have that instance.
Gotcha. I think if you do it form.instance should give it back to you, but I see. So you're just trying to get this. Okay.
Yeah. All right. It's 10:32. Let's just quickly fill out this form. HTML template. So we can do H1. We can do the type of form. So this is going to be a new form or a new cohort. And the form, this is where we add that, was that CSRF token, RF token, type of method equals a post. And yeah. We're doing the form.asp to actually display it. And then we're going to have a button, submit or save. And the type is, it's going to be a submit. This type submit on this button, because this button exists within this form, when I do type submit, it knows that when I click save is to submit this form. Yesterday, Ankur kind of showed you if I did not have this, if I had an action, I can save, I can essentially reroute this to a different method, all this data. But since I don't have an action, it's being resubmitted to this new cohort method. And that's why this logic exists within this method. All right, so if we go back here, do a hard refresh and do new. We have our cohort name. We can do Papa Platoon. I don't remember the date specifically. I don't know the date you graduate, something like that. If I click save, it reroutes me here. And now, I didn't have that here. Anyway, so I'm able to see the Papa Platoon. I can go back to cohorts. You can see Papa there right now. But let's go ahead and add a link to create a new cohort in the cohorts list page. So I can do hrj, add like a line, a tag, create new cohort. I can do href. Let's actually do that. Whoop. What am I looking for? There we go. URL, new underscore cohort. There we go. Let's actually see if that makes it a button. There we go. We can create a new cohort. Yeah, I don't remember. It's like, all right. So we created a, we got a list of cohorts. We can see an individual cohort, and we can create a new cohort. All right, we got the bulk of the routes done. Now let's go ahead and create the ability to edit a cohort. So just like cohort detail, I'm going to copy that one down here. If I go to cohort, can everyone hear me? Cool. Cohort ID / edit. Instead of cohort detail, I can say edit cohort. If I go to my views, edit cohort is very similar to that of new cohort, but the only difference is we're going to be passing in an already existing cohort instance into that form. So I'm going to copy this entire method down here. I'm going to do edit cohort. Takes in the request. It also takes in a cohort underscore ID. So I need to grab the already existing cohort that I'm trying to edit from the database. So cohort.get cohort, pass in the cohort ID. And now cohort ID. Oh no, I had that right. So I've got that cohort instance. And down here, when I first land on that page, I want to pass in the instance of that cohort. So it's already pre-filled out. So I can look at that if I come over here. And if I want to edit Papa, and I just go to edit like so, it's already pre-filled out. But when I actually click post, I also want to pass in the instance of the cohort because maybe I only fill out one field of it and not all the other fields. So if I refresh this and now I click edit and click save, I get Papa edit. Also, Ankur showed me that you can still extract the ID off the form by running print form.instance.id like that to also get the ID of the cohort. But so you can also go that route, but I'm just going to keep it as is because cohort ID, just we know kind of what that is. But Also, commit false is good when you have to add additional objects to the form before, or to the object before you actually save it. All right. Any questions about edit cohort?
So why is the
I can't. Can you speak? I can't hear you. Oh. All right. So I'm at the cohort detail page. I'm going to go ahead and create another href to edit the cohort. So instead of cohort list, I'm going to do cohort or edit cohort, where I'm passing in the cohort underscore ID to equal cohort.id. So I actually have a link to that edit cohort. So if I refresh that, oh, I already had one there, right there. So I just can copy this over. Like so. So if I refresh and click that, it'll take me to edit that cohort. And lastly, I need to create the ability to delete a cohort. So I'm back at my URLs. I can delete a cohort just like edit. I'm going to delete. So if I go to cohort ID /delete, I'm creating a delete cohort method. So if I come over here to my view, def delete underscore cohort takes in the request, the cohort underscore ID. I'm saying, hey, if the method dot or the request dot method equals post, which you should only be able to do a post request there. I'm going to grab the individual cohort, get cohort by cohort underscore ID. And I'm going to delete that cohort from the database. And I'm going to return redirect to the cohort underscore list. And I'm going to move that out here. Just regardless of whether or not a user deletes or not, it's just always going to return to the cohort list. So even if I do a get request, it's going to return to the cohort list. But also, if I do actually a post request, I also want it to redirect to the cohort list as well. So if I go back to the cohorts and say I want to delete Mike, I'm going to have a button here to delete it. So in the cohort detail, I'll need another, I can have a link to it, or I'm going to actually create a form. And this form is literally just going to delete the cohorts. Let me look at something.
Tom, is there a specific reason why you're using a form to delete it as opposed to just a button?
So you could, but the reason why it's because I'm actually updating the database. So I want to actually send like a request to something. Because if I use
that makes perfect sense. Thank you.
Cool. So I can do like button delete cohort type equals submit, and the method, again, we're using post request to delete this. We could also make it like a delete request and change the type of method here, but just for this purpose. We're just going to keep it as a post request. The action is where I'm going to send this to. What route? I'm going to send it to the delete cohort route, and the cohort underscore ID equals the cohort dot ID. And what am I missing here?
The token thing, the CSRF token.
Yep. Is that double C surf token like so? Or is that the percent sign? I believe it's the percent sign.
That'd be the percent.
Let's see if this works. So created a form here. Just do another HR thing. So if I refresh this, delete cohort, if I delete it, looks like it's deleted. And if I try to visit, does anyone remember that ID? So that would be ID 4. Match and query does not exist, means it wasn't able to find that in the database. Now, if I had to try accept, I could throw an exception or something like that. All right. So what questions do you have about this CRUD of one resource?
I have a quick question. Can you help me walk through that? On your cohort details, line 5, the href, the URL line there. So
cohort detail.
It's your right split right now. Line 5, the href going into the URL.
This one?
Yeah. Okay. So it calls when it goes to URL. Is it going into? It's going into the URL file and looking for a named URL that has that particular name, right?
100. Yep.
And then it's taking that particular. You need to make sure that you match cohort underscore ID to what's actually being expected on the other side, as a pass in for that path.
Yep.
Correct. And so that needs to match, exactly. And then you have cohort.id, and it's pulling that cohort.id from the instance of cohort that you pulled up earlier. Okay.
100%. Yep. You are exactly correct.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure that I understood where the URL part of that was pointing to, and what needed to be in what syntax. Thank you.
And also, just an FYI, if we only have one variable cohort ID in this route, we don't necessarily need to explicitly say what this cohort ID is associated with in that route. It automatically knows because there's only one variable integer that's associated with that. But as you're going to be seeing after lunch, is that when we're adding multiple nested routes with multiple IDs in that route, we're going to have to explicitly say, hey, what this ID is associated with in the URL.
Okay, thanks for explaining that, because that does look different than the examples we've seen previously. So appreciate that.
Awesome. All right.